Thomas had always thought of Lily as a little miracle. She was born blind, but she never let that limit her. Instead, she approached the world with a quiet resilience and a joyful curiosity that even he, at 13, struggled to fully understand. Her spirit seemed untethered to the limitations of her body, as if her dreams and senses extended far beyond what any ordinary person could perceive. To her, music wasn't just sound. It was a whole new world she could touch, feel, and even see in her own unique way. One afternoon, Thomas found her sitting cross-legged on the worn carpet in their small living room, her head turned toward the old radio that played softly in the background. A Beethoven sonata filled the room, the melody floating in waves that seemed to ripple through her. As each note unfurled, Lily moved her fingers delicately through the air, her hands hovering just above her lap, playing an invisible piano with astonishing grace and precision. She was lost in it, every note a brushstroke painting scenes only she could see. Thomas stood in the doorway, mesmerized. He didn't say a word, afraid of breaking the magic, afraid that if he moved, the moment would shatter. He watched her, trying to imagine what she saw in her mind, how she interpreted the world. His heart swelled, both with pride and a strange ache he couldn't quite name. Seeing her so utterly entranced, so deeply happy in a world he couldn't touch, filled him with a yearning to give her more than he or their parents could afford. "Tom," she whispered suddenly, her voice soft and dreamy, still caught in the afterglow of the music. She hadn't looked up, but somehow she knew he was there. "Yeah, Lil," he answered, stepping into the room and sitting cross-legged beside her. One day, her voice trembled slightly as if she wasn't sure how he'd respond. "One day, I'm going to play like that, just like the musicians on the radio. You'll see," she murmured, a soft smile spreading across her face, her blind eyes shining with hope. Her words were gentle, but held a conviction that startled him. His throat tightened, a mixture of pride and sadness hitting him all at once. "You think so?" he asked, his own voice barely more than a whisper, feeling the weight of her dreams as if they were his own. She turned her head toward him, and he could feel her smile widen. "I know so. I can feel it right here." She tapped her chest gently. "I just need a piano." Her words hit him like a revelation and a burden at the same time. He wanted so badly to give her that piano, to see her sit at the keys and watch her dreams come to life. But pianos were expensive, and money was something their family never had in excess. His parents worked tirelessly, doing their best to make ends meet, but there was simply no space in their budget for something as extravagant as a piano. The reality of it crushed him, but he forced himself to keep a calm expression, determined not to let her see his disappointment. That evening, as he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, he couldn't get her words out of his mind. He pictured her at a piano, her fingers dancing over the keys, her face glowing with a happiness that music alone seemed to bring her. He knew he had to find a way, no matter what it took. But how? He was just a kid with nothing to offer except his time and energy. He barely had pocket money, and the idea of making enough for a piano seemed impossible. The next day, as he and his best friend Jason Carter walked home from school, Thomas broke his silence. "Jason, I need your advice." He spoke slowly, carefully, as if voicing his plan would make it real. Jason looked over, raising an eyebrow. "Sure, what's up?" Thomas hesitated, kicking a pebble down the sidewalk, feeling strangely self-conscious about his dream. "I want to buy a piano for Lily," he began, his voice uncertain. "But I don't have any money. I thought maybe I could, I don't know, start saving somehow." Jason's eyebrows shot up in surprise, and he let out a low whistle. "A piano? Man, that's big, Tom." "I know," Thomas muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. "But Lily, his voice trailed off as he thought about her sitting in the living room, her fingers tracing the air as she imagined herself playing. "It means everything to her. She doesn't ask for much, you know? Just to have a piano, to play music like she hears on the radio." Jason nodded thoughtfully, his face softening with understanding. "That's Lily for you. But how are you going to get that kind of money?" "That's the problem. I have no idea." Thomas sighed heavily, feeling the weight of his ambition pressing down on him. "I mean, I could do odd jobs or something, but I don't know where to start." Jason fell silent, his brow furrowed as he thought. After a moment, his face lit up with an idea. "Hey, what about Mrs. Henderson? You know how she pays for recyclables? Like cans, bottles, cardboard, that kind of stuff. I've seen her give kids some cash if they bring in enough." Thomas looked at him, intrigued but uncertain. You think she'd really pay for that? Definitely. I mean, it's not a lot, but it's something. And if you go around after school and collect stuff, it could add up, Jason said, a grin spreading across his face. I could help you, you know. We can make it kind of like a project. Thomas considered this. It sounded strange, almost ridiculous, but he couldn't deny that it was an idea. And at this point, he'd try anything. He thought about Lily's words, about her dream of playing music, and a sense of determination swelled inside him. This wasn't just a whim. This was for her dreams. You really think it could work? He asked, still uncertain. Jason nodded firmly, placing a hand on Thomas's shoulder. Why not? We can cover a lot of ground if we work together. Maybe Megan could help too. She's always up for crazy ideas. Thomas's heart lifted at the thought, a flicker of hope taking root. It was a long shot, but for the first time, he felt like he might actually have a chance. That night, as he sat on the edge of Lily's bed, he shared his plan with her, letting the excitement spill into his words. She listened, her face softening as he explained his crazy idea, her expression a mix of surprise and amusement. So, you're going to pick up cans and bottles? For me? She asked, unable to hide her smile. A light laugh escaped her, the sound filling him with a warmth he hadn't realized he needed. Yeah, he said, smiling back at her. I'll do whatever it takes, Lil. You want to play the piano, right? Well, that means we need to get one. For a moment, her face turned serious, her blind eyes gazing into the distance as if she could see her dream just beyond reach. Then she reached out, her hand moving slightly through the air until he took it in his. Her grip was small and soft but filled with a strength that took him by surprise. You always find a way, Tom. I believe in you, she whispered, giving his hand a gentle squeeze. He felt a lump form in his throat, overwhelmed by the weight of her faith in him. In the days that followed, Thomas's routine grew solid and steady. Every afternoon, he would hook his makeshift cart to the back of his old bike and pedal slowly through the familiar streets, scanning alleys, sidewalks, and bins for bottles, cans, and other recyclable scraps that might help him inch closer to his goal. His friends, Jason and Megan, joined him whenever they could, knowing his mission was no ordinary one. They respected him for it, and for the first time in his young life, Thomas felt like he was doing something truly important. One particular afternoon, Thomas was on his usual route by the park, carefully stuffing empty cans into the side pocket of his cart, when he noticed a boy standing a few yards away, watching him with a curious expression. The boy seemed out of place. He wore new shoes, a crisp shirt, and had a subtle, almost skeptical gaze as he watched Thomas. Thomas recognized him right away. Tyler Evans, the new kid at school. Thomas had heard about Tyler. Rumor was that he came from a wealthy family, and everyone at school whispered that he was too rich for Willow Creek. Thomas expected him to look away or even laugh, but Tyler continued to watch, his curiosity apparently getting the better of him. Finally, Tyler walked up, his steps hesitant, as if he wasn't sure whether he wanted to approach or turn back. Hey, Tyler said, his voice carrying both surprise and a touch of something else that Thomas couldn't quite place. Why are you doing that? Thomas met his gaze, his own face calm and resolute. He'd grown used to explaining himself, though most people didn't ask directly. I'm trying to save up for a piano, Thomas answered, straightforward but with a glint of pride in his eyes. For my sister. She's blind, but she loves music. I want her to have her own piano. The words hung in the air, and for a moment, Tyler was quiet. It was clear he hadn't expected this. The idea of doing something so demanding, not for himself but for someone else, seemed almost foreign to him. Tyler blinked, his expression softened, and he looked at the ground as if weighing what he wanted to say next. That's really something, he murmured. His voice had lost its initial tone of surprise, replaced now by something closer to admiration. Doesn't it? Isn't it a lot of work? Thomas shrugged, pretending it didn't matter. It's not so bad. Besides, it's worth it if it means my sister gets her piano. Tyler bit his lip, looking around at the park and then back at the cart overflowing with recyclables. He shifted his weight, seeming to wrestle with a thought that he couldn't quite let go. Could I help? Tyler's voice was tentative, as if he feared he might be overstepping some invisible boundary. The question hung between them, and for a moment, Thomas was unsure of how to respond. No one besides Jason and Megan had ever offered to help. And this was Tyler Evans, The kid who always showed up to school with the latest gadgets and brand new clothes. Not exactly the type of person he imagined sifting through recyclables. You want to help? Thomas repeated, his tone cautious. He studied Tyler's face, looking for any hint of mockery, but all he saw was sincerity, a curious, almost uncertain sincerity. Yeah. I mean, if you'll let me, Tyler said, stuffing his hands into his pockets, clearly uncomfortable. I don't really know anyone here yet. And this sounds important. Something about the vulnerability in Tyler's voice made Thomas feel a strange sense of connection to him. He could tell Tyler wasn't used to offering help, especially for something so far removed from his own world. Thomas realized that maybe Tyler wasn't just offering his assistance. He was reaching out, looking for something beyond his own familiar comforts. After a moment's thought, Thomas nodded. All right, he said, keeping his voice steady. If you really want to help, I could use an extra pair of hands. It's not easy work, though. Tyler's face lit up, a flash of relief and excitement passing over him. I'm in, he said quickly, as if afraid Thomas might change his mind. What do I do? Thomas gestured to a pile of cans and bottles stacked nearby. We collect everything we find that's recyclable. Cans, bottles, cardboard, whatever Mrs. Henderson will pay for. She gives us a little money for it, and I'm saving every cent. Tyler nodded, bending down to pick up a bottle and inspect it. And all of this, it's really for your sister? Yeah. Thomas felt a swell of pride as he spoke. She's only 9, but she loves music more than anything. I figure if I can get her a piano, she could play for herself instead of just listening to it on the radio. The more Thomas spoke, the more Tyler seemed drawn in, his expression shifting from surprise to something deeper, something that looked almost like empathy. It was as if he was seeing beyond his own life for the first time, realizing there was a world where people worked hard for things, not because they wanted them, but because they wanted them for someone else. They spent the rest of the afternoon collecting recyclables together. Tyler was awkward at first, clearly unfamiliar with the work. But as they moved along, he began to adapt, laughing occasionally as he stumbled over a stray can or tried to fit a bottle awkwardly into the cart. So, does your sister know you're doing all this? Tyler asked after a while, wiping a bit of dirt from his hands. Thomas grinned, shaking his head. She knows I'm saving up, but I don't think she really believes I'll manage to get a piano. She's hopeful, though. Lily's always hopeful. Tyler nodded, considering this. Hopeful. I think that's cool. She sounds amazing. She is, Thomas said, his voice filled with affection. She's got this way of seeing things, you know? Even though she's blind, it's like she understands more than most people. Tyler was silent, absorbing this new perspective. It was strange, but comforting. And in Thomas, he found something he hadn't even realized he was missing. A friend who looked past the surface, who was committed, who had something real to fight for. By the time the sun began to set, Tyler had filled his first bag of recyclables, his shirt smeared with a bit of grime, his hands tired but strangely content. Are you doing this again tomorrow? Tyler asked as they loaded the last of the bags into the cart. Every day after school, Thomas replied, nodding. It's the only way I'll ever get close to the money I need. Tyler pauset. Hai es gase unwaffering. Then I'll be here tomorrow too. After a long day of collecting, Thomas was exhausted. He had carefully stacked his bags of recyclables by the garage and leaned his bike against the side of the house, ready to head inside and collapse on the couch. For a fleeting moment, he thought about pulling the bike inside the garage, but fatigue got the better of him, and he told himself he'd do it in the morning. But when Thomas stepped outside the next morning, a chill ran through him. The spot where he'd left his bike was empty. He blinked, hoping he was just misremembering. Maybe he'd left it somewhere else. He scanned the yard, checked around the garage door, and even peeked behind the bushes near the driveway. But the bike was gone, stolen. A wave of frustration and despair washed over him. That bike wasn't just his transportation, it was his lifeline to Lily's dream. Without it, everything would be harder, slower. His heart pounded as he processed the setback, and he fought the sting of tears threatening to rise. He had made a promise to his sister, and now, in a single careless night, it felt as though it had all come crashing down. When he went inside, Lily was already at the breakfast table, sensing something was wrong as soon as he entered the room. She tilted her head in his direction, her sightless eyes following his movements as if she could see his worry. "Tom," she asked quietly, What happened? He sat down heavily, not wanting to burden her but unable to keep the disappointment from his voice. My bike, it's gone, Lil. I left it outside last night, and now someone took it. Lily reached across the table, fumbling slightly until her hand found his. She held his hand tightly, her expression calm and reassuring. Don't give up, Tom, she whispered, her voice steady. You always find a way. You've done so much already, don't let this stop you. Her unwavering faith was almost overwhelming, and he nodded, squeezing her hand. I'll figure it out. I just don't know how yet, he managed, forcing himself to sound stronger than he felt. He couldn't let her down, not now. Later that day, when Tyler met up with Thomas, he noticed right away that something was different. Thomas was walking instead of riding, his usual cart trailing awkwardly behind him as he trudged along the sidewalk. Tyler's face filled with concern. Hey, where's your bike? He asked, glancing at Thomas's slow pace. Thomas sighed, his shoulders slumping. It's gone. Someone took it last night while I left it out. I wasn't careful. Now, I don't know how I'm going to keep collecting enough to reach my goal. Tyler's eyes widened, his expression growing troubled. You mean, but that bike was everything for you. How will you carry all this stuff without it? He glanced at the cart, now dragging heavily on the ground. I don't know, Tyler. I guess I'll just walk until I figure something out, Thomas replied, trying to sound confident, but his voice held an edge of hopelessness. He was determined to keep going, but deep down, he knew this setback could make it nearly impossible to meet his goal. That night, back at home, Tyler couldn't stop thinking about what Thomas had said. He'd never considered what it might feel like to lose something so essential, something that wasn't just a luxury but a tool to help someone else's dream. He sat at the dinner table, quiet and withdrawn, until his father, Matthew Evans, looked up from his meal. Tyler, something on your mind? Matthew asked, setting down his fork and studying his son with a look of mild concern. It wasn't like Tyler to be so thoughtful, and he noticed the unusual pensive look on his son's face. Tyler hesitated, unsure how to begin. He'd never spoken to his father about Thomas or the friendship that had grown between them. But he couldn't shake the image of Thomas's tired face and the empty spot where the bike should have been. Finally, he took a deep breath. Dad, there's this friend of mine. His name is Thomas. He spoke slowly, trying to find the right words. He's been working really hard to save up money to buy a piano for his sister, who's blind. It means everything to him. But his bike got stolen, and now he's stuck. He doesn't have any other way to carry the recyclables he collects every day. Matthew listened intently, his face softening as he took in what Tyler was saying. It was rare to see his son speak with such passion, especially about someone else. Tyler's voice wavered slightly, but his father saw a deep sincerity in his eyes, a kind of earnestness he hadn't expected. So this friend of yours, he's trying to help his sister by collecting recyclables? Matthew asked, his tone both surprised and intrigued. Tyler nodded, his voice growing firmer as he spoke. Yes. He's been doing it for weeks, maybe even longer. But he really needs his bike, Dad. Without it, I don't know how he'll keep going. He's already done so much just to get this far. I think he really needs some help. Matthew leaned back, considering his son's words. He could see that this wasn't a passing interest or a casual concern. Tyler was truly invested in this, and for a moment, Matthew felt a swell of pride. His son, who often seemed so detached from the world around him, was deeply moved by another person's struggle. After a long pause, Matthew finally nodded, a decision forming in his mind. All right, Tyler. Let's see what we can do to help this friend of yours, he said with a reassuring smile. Tyler's face lit up, his expression a mix of relief and gratitude. The next morning, Thomas was in the kitchen, finishing a rushed breakfast before heading out to do his usual collection rounds. He glanced at his makeshift cart, knowing today would be slower and tougher without his bike. Just as he was about to leave, he heard the sound of a car pulling up outside. He paid it little attention, assuming it was a neighbor or someone passing by, until a loud knock echoed from the front door. Curious, Thomas opened the door. He froze, his mouth falling open in disbelief. Right there in front of him was Tyler, standing beside a sleek brand-new bicycle equipped with baskets and sturdy side bags, all set up and ready for collecting recyclables. Next to Tyler stood his father, Matthew Evans, a man who looked both formal and kind, dressed in a tailored suit but with an unmistakable warmth in his eyes. "Thomas," Matthew began, stepping forward with a hand extended. "We heard about what happened with your bike. Tyler told me about the work you've been doing for your sister, and I think that's something pretty remarkable. So we wanted to make sure you could keep going." Thomas could hardly process what he was seeing. He slowly reached out to shake Matthew's hand, feeling a strange mix of excitement and disbelief. His eyes traveled over every inch of the bike, the shiny frame, the reinforced tires, the specially attached baskets that would make hauling recyclables so much easier. It was more than he could have ever dreamed of. This is for me?" Thomas stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. Matthew nodded, his expression serious but kind. "Yes, Thomas. It's for you. We want you to keep going with your project. I believe that what you're doing for your sister is something truly special." Standing beside his father, Tyler grinned widely, sharing a silent moment of triumph with Thomas. "I just thought you deserved it, Tom," he said, his voice soft but full of sincerity. "You've been doing so much, working so hard. It's inspiring, honestly." Thomas looked between the two of them, trying to keep his emotions in check. He felt a rush of gratitude so intense that it left him speechless for a moment. No one had ever done something like this for him before, and it filled him with a warmth and hope he hadn't felt in a long time. "Thank you," he managed to say, his voice choked with emotion. I don't even know how to thank you enough." Matthew placed a reassuring hand on Thomas's shoulder, meeting his eyes with a smile. "You don't need to thank us. Just keep doing what you're doing. People like you, people who don't give up on others, are rare. Your sister is lucky to have you." As if the bike weren't enough, Matthew then reached into his jacket pocket and handed Thomas an envelope. Confused, Thomas accepted it, glancing up at him. "Open it," Matthew encouraged. With shaking hands, Thomas tore open the envelope. Inside was a check, the amount written neatly in bold, unmistakable figures. It was more than he'd ever seen in his life, enough not only for a piano but for lessons and anything else Lily might need to pursue her music. He stared at the check, unable to fully grasp what he was holding. This is too much," Thomas said, his voice breaking. "I can't accept this. I was just trying to do it on my own, you know? I never expected. I never thought." "Consider it an investment in Lily's future," Matthew interrupted gently. "I've always believed that supporting others' dreams brings out the best in us. Your dedication inspired Tyler, and now you're inspiring me too. I have no doubt that with her talent, your sister will bring a lot of joy to the world. This is just a small step to help make that happen." Thomas looked down at the check, then back at Matthew and Tyler, a deep, overwhelming sense of gratitude filling his chest. He didn't know how to put everything he was feeling into words. All he could manage was a whispered, "Thank you for believing in her. And in me." Tyler gave him a playful nudge. "Well, we believe in you both, Tom. And hey, maybe one day, Lily will be playing on a huge stage, and we'll be in the audience, cheering her on." The thought filled Thomas with a hope he'd scarcely dared to imagine. For the first time, Lily's dream felt within reach, and he felt his own faith in the future ignite. That evening, the Cook household felt like it was vibrating with excitement. Thomas watched with held breath as his parents helped Lily sit down at the brand-new piano that now took center stage in their modest living room. The glossy, dark wood gleamed, and the ivory keys were smooth and cool under Lily's fingertips as she tentatively touched them, exploring each surface as if she were tracing the lines of her own dreams. She looked to Thomas, her sightless eyes wide with a mix of wonder and awe. "It's real, Tom," she whispered, almost as if she couldn't believe it herself. Her hands trembled slightly as she rested them on the keys. This is really mine." Thomas nodded, even though he knew she couldn't see him. His voice was thick with emotion. "It's all yours, Lily. Go ahead. Try it." Lily took a deep breath and let her fingers hover over the keys for a moment, unsure of where to start. Slowly, she pressed down, producing a gentle note that filled the room, clear and resonant. The sound washed over her, and for a moment, she simply listened, her face softening as she absorbed it. She pressed another key, then another, letting herself feel out each note, learning the instrument one sound at a time. Her family watched, captivated, as she played her first unsteady notes. Despite their simplicity, there was a raw beauty to them. Lily's smile widened, her fingers moving with a growing confidence as she created short, hesitant melodies that filled the room with a warmth that none of them could describe. "Tom," she said softly, turning her face toward her brother, her voice thick with tears. This is everything I've ever wanted. Thank you." Thomas felt a rush of pride and love that was almost overwhelming. He'd done it. He'd actually made her dream a reality. And seeing the pure joy on her face made every long, exhausting day of collecting recyclables worth it. In the days that followed, Lily spent hours each day at the piano, learning to navigate the keys with an instinctive understanding that seemed to grow with each passing minute. Word of Lily's new piano quickly spread around the neighborhood, and people soon heard about her extraordinary passion for music. One evening, Mrs. Evelyn Thompson, their elderly neighbor, came over for a visit. Thomas recognized her from around the block, but he knew little about her other than that she was a retired teacher and had lived in Willow Creek her entire life. Mrs. Thompson sat on the edge of the couch, listening quietly as Lily played. Her wrinkled hands folded in her lap, her expression thoughtful. She was a quiet, unassuming woman with wise, gentle eyes that seemed to take in every detail. When Lily finished her song, Mrs. Thompson clapped softly, her face lighting up with genuine admiration. "Lily, that was beautiful. Have you ever had any lessons before?" she asked, her voice filled with warmth. Lily shook her head shyly, looking slightly embarrassed. "No, ma'am. I just listen to songs and try to play what I feel. My brother helped me get this piano, so I'm trying to learn on my own." Mrs. Thompson smiled, leaning forward with a sparkle in her eyes. "Well, I was a music teacher for over 30 years. And if it's all right with you, I would be honored to teach you. I think you have something very special, Lily. A gift that very few people have. I'd like to help you discover where that gift can take you." Lily's face lit up in amazement. You'd really teach me?" "Of course," Mrs. Thompson replied, her voice soft but firm. "Music isn't just something you hear, it's something you feel. And I can tell that you have a natural understanding of it. With some guidance, I think you could go far." Thomas felt his heart swell. He had never expected this. Not only had Lily received her piano, but now she'd have a real teacher. It was more than he could have dreamed for her. He exchanged a grateful look with Mrs. Thompson, silently thanking her for her kindness. Under Mrs. Thompson's guidance, Lily quickly began to blossom as a musician. Her hands learned the keys with astonishing speed, and each note seemed to open new doors within her. Mrs. Thompson taught her not just how to play, but how to interpret the music, to feel the story behind each piece. Lily absorbed every lesson, her natural talent shining as she ventured into complex compositions that seemed to transport her to another world. One day, after a particularly moving lesson, Mrs. Thompson took a moment to speak with Thomas privately as Lily practiced. She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, her face serious yet filled with warmth. "Thomas, I want you to know that what you've done for your sister is remarkable," she said, her voice soft. "I've taught many students in my life, but Lily, she's something extraordinary. And it's because she has someone like you by her side, someone who believes in her as much as you do." Thomas looked down, feeling both proud and humbled. "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. I just wanted her to be happy, to have something that made her feel alive." Mrs. Thompson nodded, her expression growing even more thoughtful. "And she does. She's found her passion because of you. You've given her something that will stay with her forever." Each note Lily played, each song she learned, seemed to create a new, deeper bond between them. The piano became a vessel not just for her music, but for all the emotions she couldn't express otherwise, her dreams, her joy, and the connection she shared with Thomas. And under Mrs. Thompson's steady guidance, Lily's talent grew, revealing a depth that astounded everyone around her. With Lily's dream now coming to life through her music, Thomas felt a deep satisfaction that he hadn't known was possible. He had seen the joy it brought to her, and it made all his efforts feel worthwhile. But now that Lily had her piano and a teacher, Thomas found himself thinking about what else he could do, not just for Lily, but for others. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more he could accomplish. One afternoon, while he and Tyler were stacking bags of recyclables by Mrs. Henderson's shop, Thomas turned to his friend with a thoughtful look. "Tyler," he began, his voice cautious but resolute, "I was thinking, what if we tried to get more kids involved in collecting recyclables? We could do a lot more together than I can do on my own." Tyler's eyes lit up. "That's actually a great idea, Tom. We could make a real impact. You're thinking of a group or something?" Thomas nodded, warming up to the idea. "Yeah, we could call it, I don't know, maybe something like the Green Youth Group, or just Green Youth." We'd be doing something good for the environment and maybe even raise money to help other kids who need it, like we did for Lily. Tyler's enthusiasm was contagious, and soon they had roped in Jason and Megan to help brainstorm. They spent hours after school planning, sketching out ideas, and figuring out how they could spread the word. Jason, practical and down-to-earth, immediately offered to help set up collection routes and places to gather recyclables. Megan, always organized and creative, suggested they make flyers to hand out at school. People will pay attention if they see something colorful and well-designed, she explained, already pulling out a notebook to start sketching ideas. We could get people interested if we show them it's a group with a purpose. Their excitement quickly spread, and before long, other kids at school began taking an interest in what they were doing. Samantha Reed, a quiet but determined girl known for her love of nature, was one of the first to join. She approached Thomas one afternoon, her voice filled with curiosity and passion. "I heard about what you're doing," she said, adjusting her glasses. "I think it's amazing, and I'd really like to help. I have some ideas for making our collection process more eco-friendly." Thomas beamed. "That's exactly what we need, Sam. The more ideas, the better." Within days, Samantha had introduced a few practices to reduce waste and make their work more efficient. She showed them how to reuse old crates to organize the recyclables and even suggested creating posters around town to encourage others to recycle. Her ideas gave the group a professional touch, making it feel more like a movement than just a collection drive. Soon after, Alex Turner joined, bringing with him a knack for fixing things. He was known around school for his mechanical skills and could repair almost anything with just a few tools. When he heard about the group, he saw an opportunity to put his skills to good use. "You guys need collection points, right?" Alex asked, rubbing his hands together with a grin. "I could set up some sturdy bins around town and build lockable boxes so no one can mess with our stuff. I'll make them out of reclaimed wood. People won't even need to buy new ones." The group welcomed him eagerly, and Alex immediately got to work. Over the next week, he set up designated collection points throughout Willow Creek, making it easier for everyone to contribute. He even customized each point with colorful paint, labeling them with the Green Youth logo that Megan had designed. But it was when Grace Bennett joined that the group truly began to stand out. Grace, a budding artist with a gift for murals, had always been passionate about using art to tell stories. When she heard about the Green Youth group, she approached Thomas with an idea that would bring their mission to life in a way no one else had imagined. "I want to paint murals across town," Grace explained, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "They'll be big, colorful, and full of messages about recycling and taking care of the planet. I want people to see them and feel inspired to help." Thomas was immediately captivated by her idea. "Grace, that's incredible. If people see those murals every day, it'll remind them why we're doing this. It'll make recycling more than just a chore." Grace set to work right away, transforming empty walls into vibrant, meaningful works of art. Each mural was unique, featuring bold colors and symbols of nature, trees, animals, oceans, with words that reminded everyone of the importance of protecting the earth. Her artwork became a source of pride for the town, and people started stopping by to admire them, often staying to drop off their recyclables or ask about the Green Youth Group. The Green Youth Group quickly became a fixture in Willow Creek, uniting kids who were passionate about making a difference. They organized weekend events where the entire group would meet at the park, pick up trash, and sort through recyclables. Each time they gathered, their numbers grew, as more kids joined the movement, motivated by the impact they were having on their community. With every event, Thomas felt a growing sense of accomplishment. What had started as a desperate mission to help his sister had now transformed into something far bigger than he could have imagined. The Green Youth Group wasn't just a team of kids collecting recyclables. They were a force, a community of young people working together to create change. And as the group continued to expand, Thomas felt something he hadn't expected: hope. Not just for Lily, but for everyone around him. With the Green Youth Group thriving, new challenges emerged just as quickly as new members. What had begun as a simple idea had grown beyond what Thomas could have imagined. Week by week, the group gathered more recyclables, organized bigger events, and made a significant impact on Willow Creek. But the scale of their mission was becoming difficult for Thomas to manage alone. During one of their weekly meetings in the park, Thomas noticed the group's energy felt different. Some kids were sitting apart, looking tired, and a few were murmuring under their breath. He could hear snippets of complaints. The work was tough, Some thought it was unfair they had to do so much heavy lifting, and a few even questioned whether they could keep coming back every week. Feeling a weight settle in his chest, Thomas tried to start the meeting with his usual energy. But he couldn't ignore the tension. He glanced at Tyler, who was standing nearby, watching the group with a worried expression. After a few minutes of awkward silence, one of the younger members, Danny, spoke up. "Thomas," Danny said, looking down and kicking at the grass. "I'm not sure I can keep doing this every week. It's a lot of work. My arms get sore, and I don't know if it's worth it." The honesty in Danny's voice struck a chord with others. Several kids nodded, murmuring in agreement. Thomas swallowed hard, feeling an overwhelming sense of responsibility. The group had grown so fast, and while he was proud of what they'd achieved, he realized he hadn't thought about how to keep everyone motivated. He hadn't considered how to make things fair and sustainable for each of them. "Look, I get it," Thomas said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I know it's hard work. I didn't expect things to get so big, and I'm sorry if it feels like it's too much. But I really believe in what we're doing. And I think if we stick together, we can find a way to make this work for all of us." Tyler stepped forward, sensing Thomas's struggle. "Hey Tom," he said quietly, placing a hand on his friend's shoulder. "You don't have to carry all of this by yourself. We're all here because we care about this too. We can figure out a way to make it easier. What if we split up the jobs?" Thomas looked at Tyler, feeling both gratitude and relief. Tyler was right. He didn't have to do everything himself, and he didn't have to be the one making every decision. The Green Youth Group was about all of them, and if he wanted it to succeed, he'd need to learn to trust and rely on his friends. "All right," Thomas said, nodding thoughtfully. He turned to the group, encouraged by Tyler's support. "What if we create teams? Each team could be responsible for different tasks, so nobody feels like they're doing all the work. We could have one group that focuses on collecting recyclables, another that organizes drop-off points, and another that helps Grace with the awareness murals. We'd rotate, so everyone gets a chance to try something different." The idea sparked interest, and slowly, the kids' expressions shifted from weary to curious. Megan, who had been quiet until now, raised her hand. "I like that idea. Maybe we can even keep track of each team's progress, like a game, and see which team collects the most. That might make it more fun." Samantha nodded, adding her thoughts. "And if we have a team just for organizing the collected items, it'd go a lot faster. We'd have fewer people doing the heavy lifting, but we'd rotate, so no one gets stuck doing the same thing all the time." The group started to come alive again, each member throwing out ideas, sharing ways to make the process smoother and more enjoyable. The more they talked, the more Thomas felt the tension ease. His friends weren't only supporting him, they were helping him become a better leader, showing him how to share the load and how to listen. After the meeting, Tyler walked over to Thomas with a satisfied grin. "See? You didn't have to take it all on alone. We're here for you, Tom, and we're in this together." Thomas nodded, his voice soft but grateful. "I know. I think. I just got so focused on making it work that I forgot we're a team. I was trying to do too much by myself." Tyler laughed. "Well, that's what friends are for. To remind you that you're human and that it's okay to need help." Over the next few weeks, the Green Youth Group continued to grow, but now with more structure and shared responsibilities. Each team took pride in its role, and the kids became more connected, more committed to their shared mission. The collection points around town became more organized, and thanks to Alex's ingenuity, they even built a central station for sorting and counting items. Grace's murals continued to inspire others, and their community outreach brought even more people into the movement. The impact they were making was unmistakable. People around Willow Creek began to notice not only the cleaner streets and colorful murals, but the unity and passion of the young group working tirelessly toward a common goal. The Green Youth Group had become a symbol of positive change, and their efforts began inspiring local businesses and even adults to pitch in and support their mission. Thomas felt himself grow into his role with each meeting, learning to trust, delegate, and lead in a way that made others feel valued. The group wasn't just making a difference in the town, it was shaping him and everyone involved, turning them into a community bound by a purpose larger than any of them had imagined. The night of Lily's first performance was a night the Cook family would remember forever. Word had spread quickly through Willow Creek, and the auditorium at the local school was filled to capacity, with nearly every seat taken and people spilling into the aisles. Neighbors, friends, teachers, and townsfolk, many of whom had supported Thomas and Lily's journey in some way, had all gathered to see this young girl's dream unfold. Thomas sat in the front row, his heart racing with excitement and nerves. He felt a surge of pride as he looked around and saw Tyler, Jason, Megan, and the entire Green Youth group by his side. Everyone was there, all waiting with anticipation, their eyes fixed on the stage where a single piano stood under the spotlight. For all of them, this performance was more than just a recital. It was the culmination of months of dedication, friendship, and hope. A hush fell over the crowd as Lily was guided onto the stage. Dressed in a simple, elegant dress, she looked smaller and younger than her 9 years, but there was a grace and determination in her every step. She moved slowly, her hands reaching out carefully until they touched the edge of the piano bench. With a quiet, calm determination, she sat down and took a moment to find her bearings, her hands hovering above the keys. Thomas leaned forward, hardly able to breathe as he watched his sister prepare. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and placed her fingers on the keys. The silence was absolute as everyone in the room seemed to hold their breath, waiting, watching. Then, as if by magic, the first note rang out, clear and resonant, filling the entire room. Lily's fingers moved gently at first, her touch tentative as she let the melody unfold. The notes were soft and delicate, each one resonating with a tenderness that brought a hush over the crowd. Her fingers glided over the keys, gaining confidence with each movement, her face a portrait of concentration and pure radiant joy. She swayed slightly as she played, letting the music guide her, her expression serene and full of an emotion that was almost otherworldly. Thomas felt his heart swell with pride and wonder. This was his sister, the girl who had dreamed of this moment for as long as he could remember. He watched, transfixed, as she lost herself in the music, her hands moving faster now, the melody building, expanding, filling every corner of the auditorium. Each note seemed to carry with it the weight of their journey, the long days collecting recyclables, the friendships they had formed, and the obstacles they had overcome. Beside him, Tyler whispered, barely able to contain his awe. "She's incredible, Tom. I've never seen anything like this." Thomas nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "I know," he murmured, his voice thick. She's everything." As the piece continued, the music shifted, becoming richer, more complex. Lily's fingers danced over the keys, each chord a testament to her passion and determination. She wasn't just playing notes, she was telling a story, her story. The music held within it the laughter and struggles, the dreams and heartaches, the unwavering bond she shared with her brother. The audience sat in silent awe, many with tears in their eyes, completely absorbed by the magic of her performance. At one point, Lily's hands hesitated, and Thomas felt a surge of anxiety, but she quickly regained her composure, her fingers moving with renewed confidence. She continued, her face glowing with a joy that was contagious, filling everyone who watched with a sense of wonder. The room was silent but for the sound of her music, each note weaving a tapestry of love, resilience, and hope. Finally, as the last notes echoed and faded into silence, the room remained still, everyone seemingly held in place by the power of the music. And then, as if a spell had been broken, the audience erupted into applause. The sound was thunderous, filling the auditorium with cheers, whistles, and the unmistakable sound of people rising to their feet. It was a standing ovation, a wave of love and admiration that washed over Lily. Lily stood, her head held high as she turned slightly, sensing the direction of the applause. A smile spread across her face, and her cheeks flushed with pride. She lifted her head as if she could see the faces around her, and then, as if by instinct, she turned toward where she knew Thomas was sitting in the front row. Thomas, overwhelmed with pride and emotion, stood clapping as hard as he could, his eyes misted with tears. He met her gaze, feeling as if they were the only two people in the room, connected by a shared history that no one else could fully understand. She held out her hand, inviting him to join her on stage. Without hesitation, Thomas made his way to the stage, his heart pounding with every step. As he reached her, he took her hand, pulling her into a tight, tear-filled embrace. He whispered, barely able to speak, "You did it, Lily. You really did it." She pulled back slightly, her eyes shining with emotion as she smiled up at him. "No, Tom," she said softly, her voice filled with warmth and love. "We did it." The audience continued to clap and cheer, but for that moment, it was as if the entire world had faded away, leaving only the two of them, bound by a love and dedication that had brought them here. Their friends gathered around, joining them on stage, each one adding their own pride and joy to the moment. Tyler, Jason, Megan, and all the members of the Green Youth Group hugged and congratulated them, each one knowing they had played a part in this incredible journey. Strich. The story of Thomas and Lily Cook became a cherished tale in Willow Creek, a story that people passed down as an example of resilience, kindness, and the power of community. Their journey inspired others, showing how a single dream could unite a town and transform lives. Tyler and his father, Matthew, gained a new understanding of the impact of small acts of kindness. They had witnessed how one small gesture, a bike, a little help, could set in motion a chain of events that would bring about lasting change. The Green Youth Group continued their work with renewed purpose, expanding their efforts to help others and spreading a message of environmental awareness and hope. Over the years, Willow Creek changed, becoming a place known for its generosity and its people's willingness to work together for the good of all. And through it all, Thomas and Lily's story remained at the heart of the town's spirit, a reminder that dreams, no matter how impossible they might seem, are worth fighting for.
If you've made it this far, then subscribe to the channel and leave a comment.